Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, and welcome to the Steadfast and Loyal podcast.
You gotta light 'em up before they burn it down. Better dig deep and put 'em in the ground. Blood on their hands, they're hellbound. Save us all. Ooh, they're gonna burn it down. Save us all before they burn it down.
This episode of the Steadfast and Loyal podcast is brought to us by our friends at the United States Concealed Carry Association. The USCCA helps responsible Americans like you prepare for what happens before, during, and after an act of lawful self-defense. USCCA members get life-saving education, expert training, plus self-defense liability insurance. These benefits provide more than 500,000 USCCA members with the peace of mind that they deserve. Plus, a USCCA membership is always risk-free with their 100% money-back, quote-unquote, bulletproof guarantee. Membership is truly an investment worth exploring. Click Learn More below right now to activate your United States Concealed Carry Association membership. Click Learn More right now. And remember, the USCCA is not an insurance company. A policy has been issued to the USCCA by Universal Fire and Casualty Insurance Company. That policy provides the association and its members with self-defense liability insurance subject to its terms, conditions, limitations, and exclusions. And ladies and gentlemen, if we continue to have violent criminals released back out onto the streets, you have the right to be able to defend yourself, and the USCCA will make sure that you can have a proper defense of yourself if it comes to a legal court hearing. We'll be right back. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Steadfast and Loyal podcast. I am joined with, as promised, Robert L. Woodson Sr., a true mentor to me and an incredible man. He is the founder and president of the Woodson Center. 1776 Unites and Voices of Black Mothers United. He is an influential leader on issues of poverty alleviation and empowering disadvantaged communities to become agents of their own uplift. Woodson is a frequent advisor to local, state, and federal government officials, as well as businesses and philanthropic organizations. His social activism dates back to the 1960s when, as a young civil rights activist, he developed and coordinated national and local community revitalization programs. During the 1970s, he directed the National Urban League's Administration of Justice Division. Later, he served as a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He is the recipient of the prestigious John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Genius Fellowship Award, the Bradley Prizes presented by the Lynn and Harry Bradley Foundation, the Presidential Citizens Medal, the 2018 William Wilberforce Award, the Heritage Foundation's 2020 Salvatore Prize for American Citizenship, Hillsdale College's Freedom Leadership Award, and many other awards and honors. He is the author of several books, including On the Road to Economic Freedom, The Triumphs of Joseph, How Today's Community Healers Are Reviving Our Streets and Neighborhood, Lessons from the Least of These, The Woodson Principles, and the newly released #1 bestseller, Red, White, and Black, Rescuing American History from Revisionists and Race Hustlers. And I'm sure many of you have seen Mr. Woodson on either Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham. Sir, thank you so much for joining us here at the Steadfast and Loyal podcast.
Pleased to be with you, Colonel.
You know, we were just up there in Tinley Park, Tinley Park, Illinois, suburb of Chicago, for a Black Conservative Summit. And you bring up so many great points, things that I remember growing up in the old Fourth Ward neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, there, Sweet Auburn Avenue. What happened in the Black community where we went from this thriving community, I was born in 61, where we had the two-parent households, we had good quality education, small business entrepreneurship, and look where we are today. What were some of the contributing factors? Because you've been out there on this battlefield for quite some time and you've seen it.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. But let me just say the disclaimer is the reason that we're in this mess that we're in today, a lot of us are, has nothing to do with the shadow of slavery or Jim Crow.
Are you kidding me? I thought it was
I wish it were the problem. It'd be easier to fix.
Yeah.
I tell people I was born during the Depression in a low-income black neighborhood, with 98% of all households with a man and a woman raising children. I never heard elderly people could walk safely in those communities without fear of being assaulted by their grandchildren. I never heard a gun fired, never heard of children being murdered in their cribs. None of these so-called heinous acts were prevalent in this low-income black neighborhood. And so what has changed is not what white people have done in a sense, but government policies since the 60s did more to destabilize families, undermine neighborhoods in the name of urban renewal and poverty alleviation. It's just been a tragic. We went from, in 1980, in 1965, 85% of all black families had a man and woman raising children. And now that's under 30%.
Yeah.
All within a few decades. So it was a helping hand that destroyed us. And also this somehow we are permitted the rich legacy of the civil rights movement to be hijacked by liberal progressives and visiting and using it as a bludgeon against the country. And that's so it's a combination of retreat on the cultural front, abandonment of the principles of family and faith that was the foundation of our survival from slavery and Jim Crow. And those values are being attacked and assaulted. And that's why we've got to push back to defend those values.
You know, you're absolutely right. And Jason Riley, who is on the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, wrote a book called Please Stop Helping Us. and he articulates exactly what you're saying. And when you sit in, like I said, when I remember seeing doctors' offices and lawyers' offices, black-owned banks, Citizens Trust Bank, there at Piedmont and Auburn Avenue, all the things that I saw, good quality education, that was indicative of the community that I was brought up in. That was indicative of our community. And you said something there a couple of weeks ago that just absolutely floored me. You know, you said that the answer to segregation should not have been integration. It should have been desegregation. Can you expound upon that?
Yeah, I've split with the civil rights leadership in the late 60s on that whole issue. I believe we incorrectly argue that separate is inherently unequal. Whenever you argue something is inherently unequal, you're saying that anything is all black is all bad. Mm-hmm. So the opposite of segregation is desegregation, and pluralism is the goal. And I was debating this with Julius Chambers, the black lawyer, head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at the time, a Harvard lawyer, before the New York Bar Association. And midway through that debate, I said, Julius, we have two circumstances. A, there's an all-black school where there's a presence of educational excellence, and school B, it's integrated where there's diminished excellence. Where should we send our children? He said, to school B. I said, then there's no debate here. I said, that is flawed. What we should do is what Marva Collins did in Chicago, and that is a disaffected public school teacher started the East Side Academy in a little rundown neighborhood where she took children that the public schools couldn't teach with special needs, and they began to flourish. White parents began to bring their children into the East Side Academy because it should be the presence of excellence that we should be pursuing, and then the byproduct will be integration.
You know, it's amazing that you made that so simple, and that you think about all of those black-owned businesses. taxi services, busing services, everything, the educational aspect, the historic black colleges and universities. But then all of a sudden, those things disappear. And we got focused on something that, as you said, it was not about excellence. To me, it was more about acceptance and being, in certain spheres and in certain communities or certain areas and arenas. But we sacrificed being victors in order to, in a way, become victims. How do we correct that? Because to me, it's a mentality, because it's gone on now for about 50 some odd years. How can we correct this?
Well, on the 28th of 18th of April, I did a show with Dr. Phil, and that's going to air on the 18th. And this question was asked by me about reparations and all, and I was asked about what is the answer? What should black people do? And I said, for a year, we need to stop whining about white folks.
That ain't happening.
Just stop talking about what white folks have done in the past and focus on what we accomplished in the presence of Jim Crow. We should focus on Sweet Auburn Avenue, the Black Bottom in Detroit, the Dawnsville section of Chicago in 1929. We had 731 black-owned businesses, 100 million in real estate assets there. That's just one city. When we were denied access to hotels, we built our own, the Wallahaji in Atlanta.
Yes.
And I could go on, name all of them. We did this by financing it ourselves. We didn't worry about being redlined. And so nobody, there's nothing more discouraging when you continually bombard people with their inability, their incapacity, and say to them, unless white people change, there's little you can do for yourself. That is the essence of white supremacy.
It's that soft bigotry of low expectations that says you can't achieve this standard. And so we will lower this standard to a point where we think that you can make it, but that's not the history that is out there. And so when I continue to hear about, 1619 Project, and, we got to focus on all of this that happened in the past, but yet it's a selective focus on what has happened in the past. We're not talking about the incredible business entrepreneurship. We're not talking about a Madam C.J. Walker, who was the first black female millionaire long before Oprah Winfrey comes along. And when you look at our system of education, which has become more of a system of indoctrination, how do we correct that? Because the public schools, the teachers' unions especially, they don't want to see success in, I believe, a lot of these inner city communities.
Well, what we did at the Woodson Center with our 1776 Unites essays, we turned them into curriculum. We had 85,000 downloads in all 50 states.
Wow.
And one of those, in the military, you're talking about the Golden 13. In 1943, blacks were not naval officers, and Eleanor Roosevelt persuaded her husband to tell the Navy to train them. Well, the Navy said they're going to give these 16 cadets in 8 weeks what they give white cadets in 16 weeks. Well, when these brothers found out about it, they covered the windows in their barracks and stayed up all night and studied. And when they were tested, they scored in the 90th percentile.
Yeah.
And then they said they cheated, so they retested them individually, and they scored in the 93rd percentile. To this day, Alan, those test scores were the highest ever achieved by anyone going through that academy. Today, that record still holds.
Now, that was the 1940s.
43.
And if you listen to the rhetoric today, we're supposed to believe that that's not possible. Not, on top of the fact that people don't even talk about it. There are so many people out there, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, I don't care. They never heard about that. They don't know anything about it. Other than the fact that a movie came out years ago, people don't know about Tuskegee Airmen. They don't know about the first black naval aviator in the movie that just came out, last November, which had a poor showing in the box office. Why is it that we have a suppression of all of these great stories in the black community, but yet we want to elevate the victim story?
Because our civil rights organizations have morphed into a race grievance industry. They were the ones who migrated from civil rights leaders to Black elected officials. They were the ones who have been running these cities for the last 50 years, expending the $22 trillion from the government poverty program, where 70% of that money goes to a lot of their friends, and they only look for problems that are fundable, not issues that are solvable. So we created a commodity out of poor Blacks, and the caretakers of those are other middle class Blacks. So we're locked in a paradigm where there's no incentive to promote independence and self-sufficiency. So we use a race to deflect attention away from this incompetent relationship and this toxic relationship. As long as we got white people to blame, then they won't look at the motives in our own eye.
You know, and it talks about that in the Bible, that it says you should not be complaining about the speck in your brother's eye when you have a log in your own. You know, you and I were talking about this issue, and this is something that I've always believed. This is no longer about political parties. This is about philosophy of governance. This is about ideology. This is about getting back to fundamental principles and values. And you said, incredibly so, that Blacks, you know, got to stop worrying about Republican and Democrats. Can you finish that thought that you shared?
Yeah, if you go to any low-income, high-crime area in this country, you cannot tell me which political party is in power. You cannot tell me which political philosophy is in power. Low-income people, particularly low-income Blacks, have no permanent friends or permanent enemies, just permanent issues. I want Blacks to be swing voters. I want them to vote intelligently so people will have to compete for their votes and not do. What's the biggest voter suppression is apathy.
Yeah.
If you go in these cities like Washington, D.C., Detroit, Newark, and all, you will find in local elections in low-income Black neighborhoods, the turnout is under 8%. So, but no one addresses the apathy that is suppressing the Black vote, and because they're not giving any choices.
You know, and instead, the progressive socialist left establishment will say that the voter suppression is because of, you know, Georgia want to have an accountability in election laws or whatever. They're not talking about that apathy.
Not at all. In fact, the states with the most stringent voter registration laws had the highest Black turnout.
In Georgia, my home
in
state.
In Georgia and other places. So this is a phony issue, man. They'll do anything to deflect away from their personal responsibility. When I have a listing of people who I call the Black robber barons, a whole listing,
yeah,
a whole listing of Black elected officials like Ray Nagin, Bill Jefferson, Chaka Fattah. I can go on and on. People who have been guilty of what I call treason, that they were elected to serve their people and they use it to enrich themselves at the expense of their people, and race prevents them from being held accountable. There's never any outrage when a Black elected official like Kwame Kirkpatrick in Detroit and 42 of his thugs just literally raped the pension funds of low-income workers in that city, and he went to jail and was released. There's no outrage. There's no indignation. There's not even any discussion of it. And many of these same robber barons then come out and run for office again.
Yes, they do. And what was it, Marion Barry?
Marion Barry did. Mel Reynolds,
yep,
who was a pedophile, who had sex with a teenage girl in his campaign and went to jail. And he was released and went to work for Jesse Jackson on Operation Push. His family is in poverty, living in a public housing development in Boston, but no one looks at, and yet he ran for re-election for his old seat against Jesse Jackson Jr. See, these are the issues that where we need to be discussing. Where is the moral outrage? at this treasonous behavior. No, we're preoccupied with racism. And that's why the whole issue of reparations and racism is a deflection.
Yeah.
It's a head nod.
Yeah, it's a fake on the basketball
court.
It's
a fake. It's a fake.
You know, let's talk about the organization Voices of Black Mothers United, because I really believe, as I said up there in Tinley Park, that black mothers, black women have to reassert themselves, and they have to say enough, because we're losing our children. We're losing our children to murder. We're losing our children as far as education. We're losing our children as far as the sexualization of the children. So tell us about Voices of Black Mothers United.
It's led by Sylvia Bennett Stone, a longtime consultant trainer with us, whose 16-year-old daughter was viciously shot to death while sitting in a car along with her girlfriend. And she turned that pain into purpose. And she said that no one wants to hear about the black-on-black crime. And so she has now organized thousands of mothers in 23 chapters around the country. They have come together to give voice to the 80% of Black Americans who by polls do not support defund the police. But we took out a full-page ad with these mothers supporting the police. We've had events and victim rights weeks all over the country where we partner with the police. 5 of our locations, the mothers work for the homicide department division, and to develop trusting relationship between the distressed parents and the police. And as a result, they have closed more cases in those cities because of distrust. So this is our attempt on the part of to give voice to those mothers, and so that they can help each other. So every day, Sylvia gets a call because 35% of these mothers, after about 7 years, many of them end up committing suicide or die from what they call broken heart syndrome. And so Sylvia tries to set up a support group among moms, and she's talked many of them out of suicide.
Wow.
And so it is.
You know, you have such a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. As we wrap up this interview, what is Robert Woodson's golden nugget to share with the audience here at the Steadfast and Loyal podcast?
First of all, I'm a cardiac Christian, and my political philosophy is radical pragmatism. And I believe that all of the stress that is happening, that God is preparing us for a revival.
Amen.
That the highest, and I believe that we must prepare ourselves for this revival by focusing on what we accomplished in the past, that people are motivated to change and improve when you show them victories that are possible. And that's what we must do to convince people that these values of faith and family of this country are worthy of support. But we must demonstrate it. I just finished watching The Chosen, and everyone should watch that series. But when the servants of John the Baptist came to him and said, "Are you the one, or do we seek another?" we must do what Jesus did. And that is heal in their presence, do things that help improve and redeem people's lives, and then tell doubters to go back and tell what you saw.
Yeah. Well, without a doubt, the body of Christ, this is a moment for us to answer the call and to step up and, as it says in Romans 12:1, not to conform to the world, but transform the world through the renewing of our minds. And I pray that that revival is coming. I pray that that renewing of our minds is coming. And you will, without a doubt, will be an instrumental part of that. So how can people follow you? The Woodson Center, 1776 Unites, and Voices of Black Mothers United. How can people follow and support?
You can go on our website, which is woodsoncenter.org, and 1776unites.com. And you will see a complete description of what we do. You can contribute. Go buy the books. I have 2 books, Lessons from the Least of These, that represents a compilation of all my experiences and knowledge that I've gained from the people I serve. And then the other one is 1776 Unites, which is very uplifting. And we have a animated series coming out, Alan, on that we hope to be producing for children. That's very inspirational, about figures from the past who have achieved great things that we don't know about.
And that's so important because we just recently saw, I don't know if it was Comedy Central or whatever, this Proud Family cartoon where it had the kids talking about slavery and racism. We have got to meet the left at every point where they try to infiltrate and influence society and culture. And that's exactly what you do. And it's an honor to have had you on this podcast. And hopefully you'll come back again.
I'd be delighted to.
Thank you so very much. Robert L. Woodson Sr., founder and president of the Woodson Center, 1776 Unites, and Voices of Black Mothers United. God be with you, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alan.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us on this episode of the Steadfast and Loyal podcast. A special thanks to a man that I look up to, truly a mentor as a young Black conservative, and that's Robert L. Woodson Sr. Hopefully you enjoyed his insights and thoughts and perspectives. Such a brilliant man. And if you like this podcast, please click the like button, share it with others, because we're here to make sure that you're better informed, better educated, better activated to preserve this great constitutional republic. Until next time, steadfast and loyal.
Before they burn it down.